Hello and welcome back to One Trek Mind with me, Raptor.
And me, Michael.
And we hope you all had a very happy Christmas and a great new year with all of the festivities over that period. But we are back and we have a few final things to say about Lower Decks now that the show is finally over. I shouldn't really say finally over, should it? Should I? It makes it sound like we didn't like it. Now that the show has concluded with Season 5, we have our few final things to say about the Season 5 overall and the show overall. So I think it's best to start with the easiest of the questions, which is, what did we think of Season 5?
And for me, Season 5 overall was a little bit of a disappointment. I enjoyed it. Like, there hasn't been a single season of the show that I thought was bad. I just feel this one was a little bloated with filler episodes and several missed opportunities to get to know crew members in a way that I think would have been a little bit more substantial. And all in all, the actual wrap-up of the series, again, I thought was just kind of all right. It didn't really end on a note that I felt would have been really good for a finale, specifically a series finale.
I'm pretty much in agreement there. I thought Season 5 was definitely the weakest of all of the seasons. Whether that's due to the fact that they weren't completely aware it was being cancelled until fairly late on, or whether it was just a bad season. Every Star Trek show has a bad season, and in Discovery's case, more than one. It definitely wasn't quite up to the standard of the other seasons. There were plenty of entertaining episodes or entertaining bits, but overall I thought the quality was definitely lower. And there were some things that just didn't seem to be expanded on, which would have been nice. Some things that seemed rushed. Some things that definitely seemed pulled out of thin air all of a sudden, such as Rutherford's sudden, falling out of love with the Cerritos. That seemed to be sort of pulled out of almost thin air. So yeah, I definitely think it's weaker. Not to say, like you said, that it was a bad season. It's even its worst season stands heads and shoulders above Picard Season 1 or 2, or Discovery Season 1 or 2.
Or I would even say Next Gen Season 1 or 2.
I was about to say Next Gen Season 1 or 2. I think for the show to end I think it's a bad thing. It definitely feels like the show could have carried on for at least another season, if not more. Obviously, all shows have to end, but it does feel like now Paramount seems to be resting their hopes on Strange New Worlds, which is legitimately a very good Star Trek show, and then resting the other part of its hopes on the Section 31 film and this Starfleet Academy streaming show they want to do, neither of which sound particularly great to us two, do they?
I mean, it's too early for me to say anything about Starfleet Academy, because I think that idea is a great sounding show. It's something I've wanted to see in Star Trek, is, how are they all trained up to be the officers that they're supposed to be. Given that it's going to be in the Discovery time period, that makes me very nervous. And other than that, there's not really any information, so I'm just very cautious on that one. And Section 31 just straight up does not look good. Both trailers that have dropped for it have not inspired me with very much hope that it's going to be a good movie. So right now, the only thing I would say good going for them now that Lower Decks is gone is Strange New Worlds, which even it has its fair share of problems that could be improved on. So yeah, I feel like they're putting their faith in the wrong things, it would seem.
I mean, I think Lower Decks was also very useful to have as a show to have alongside Strange New Worlds, because then you have a serious show and you have a much more levity inducing show, although I do have some things to say about that in the next bit. But yeah, I think it was good to have a different sort of Star Star Trek show running alongside a more traditional sort of Star Trek show. Now we just have traditional Star Trek, and yes, you could argue that the Section 31 movie is a very different sort of Star Trek, but potentially way too much. I mean, the Section 31 film we will have to watch at some point, but just from the outset it looks like they're trying to do a Suicide Squad with it, which just seems to be jumping on the bandwagon of all of the other big franchises at the moment, and I'm not sure that's the best idea.
Yeah, and to me, that doesn't work well with the Star Trek. I don't want to say the Star Trek formula, but I just really don't think it's what Star Trek fans are interested in and what's going to keep us engaged. This whole attempt with all kinds of different franchises, trying to pull in people who aren't interested in it to begin with, I think it's just a waste of time. It's like either people are going to be interested in your IP or they're not. Trying to get everyone to be interested in this one specific thing is just gonna lead to disaster. Like, that's how you lead to focus groups controlling the writing and direction of a show, as opposed to the writers who have a very specific idea in mind.
I mean, we have this example exactly here with you. You watched the first of the Abrams verse movies, you know, a movie that he has gone on record as saying he made it to appeal to people who weren't Star Trek fans, to bring them into the fandom.
Yeah,
and you watched it, and you didn't. It took me exposing you to selective episodes of Star Trek that I knew to get you into watching the rest of it. Difference between someone who knows the stuff and someone who doesn't.
Without any other knowledge, I enjoyed the Abrams movies as just fun action romps because I didn't know anything about Star Trek, but they didn't get me to want to go watch more Star Trek. I was just like, okay, that was a fun little movie, I guess. Moving on with my life. It was watching First Contact that got me to go, wow, interesting and unique, and didn't feel anything like any of the Star Wars movies or anything that I've watched that felt like something kind of cool.
I feel we are getting away from the topic slightly. We'll get back to it in a sec. But I feel like this is a problem that a lot of franchises seem to be doing at the moment, is this very strange perception that they have to change what they are to get people to come to the franchise, as opposed to trying to aim for people that like what they already do. I wouldn't want Star Wars to try to become Star Trek to appeal to me. I would rather Star Wars remain Star Wars to appeal to the fans of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with trying new things, being unique. I enjoy a little bit of variety, but I think it's important to remember what your fan base likes. And I think Lower Decks is a good example of trying something a little bit new that still is something that Star Trek fans would enjoy for just different reasons than the other Star Trek series. Again, it's clear that the creators of Lower Decks really love Star Trek and are very knowledgeable about everything in Star Trek. They like to poke fun at it, but also take it seriously when it's needed. And in general, took the lighter approach to it while still feeling like a Star Trek series. It still had the correct vibe about it. Whereas you have something like Discovery or Picard, where again, they went for something unique, sure, but it just didn't feel like Star Trek anymore. It felt too different to what the fans wanted out of it. And it's a fine line. I will fully admit that is a very difficult thing to do, to try and create something unique and new and still appeal to the fan base and give them what they want. But again, I think something like Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds have hit it on the money with
definitely
let's do something new, but let's also give it our own little flair. Let's try and make it something at least somewhat unique to the Star Trek universe.
Deep Space Nine did that with the legacy shows and is generally widely considered the best of all Star Trek now.
And wasn't at the time, which was interesting. At the time, it was really canned.
I definitely wasn't a fan of DS9 at the time, but I think that was because I would say a lot of Deep Space Nine requires a more adult mindset to understand, and as young as I was at the time, I just didn't get a lot of the themes and a lot of the subtleness to a lot of the characterizations and stuff, so a lot of it passed me by, so I didn't get it at the time. Having watched it all the way through as an adult now, it's wonderful.
And I only watched it as an adult, and I just thought it was great.
Which leads us to a more difficult question I have, and I think we're going to have very different answers here, which is what our view of Lower Decks overall as a show is. And I just want to put this in the context of, you are the one who convinced me to watch Lower Decks, because I was 100% against the show from the minute it was conceived. We had just had Discovery Season 1 and 2 and Star Trek Picard Season 1, and they then unveil this Rick and Morty cartoon with the trailer full of relatively unfunny slapstick humor, and at the time I was like, fuck off, go away. After Discovery Season 1 and 2 and Picard Season 1, you then vomit this up to us, which I think, given the context of that time, I think is a perfectly reasonable response to have. I mean, Discovery 1 and 2, Season 1 and 2 were just not very good. Picard Season 1 was something else, and I think as a traditional Star Trek fan, I couldn't help but feel like this Rick and Morty style cartoon now being presented to me was just like the final nail in the coffin of just like, you guys have no fucking clue what Star Trek is supposed to be. Obviously, having watched all of the show, perhaps I was a bit harsh at that time, but I think at the time the response was understandable, at least.
I mean, I'm just a big proponent of giving things a chance. Like, as much as I think the trailer for Section 31 movie looks really bad, I'm still gonna go into that movie clean slate, just critically thinking, trying to see if I do in fact enjoy the movie or not. And that's how I felt about Lower Decks. Because I never saw the trailer for it, but you did tell me, you're like, I don't think it's gonna be good. It's like a slapstick humor, weird kind of cartoon that I don't think gets Star Trek at all. But yeah, I was the one who convinced you and said, like, just give it a shot. Like, let's just sit down and watch a couple episodes and see if we in fact do not like it or not. And after the first episode, you still did not like it, but then I think we waited a couple weeks or something and then went back at it for a few more, and that's when the opinions started to change.
I will say that it definitely won me over in some respects, but there is a question which formulated over the Christmas break, because Lower Decks reminds me of the Orville in many respects, very much inspired by, if not a direct parody of, Star Trek, making use of many conceits and cliches that Star Trek over the years have developed, making use of considerable levels of humor, both slapstick, some more witty, situational. And the question that came to mind was, is it enough for a parody show to just be funny and not have anything more important to say? Because in the Orville's case, yes, it's so very Star Trek, it might as well be called Star Trek. They were perfectly willing to do some very hard-hitting, very serious character arcs, story arcs, episodes, many subjects of which I thought they did even better than the way Star Trek has handled some subjects. Lower Decks, on the other hand, revels in the comedy and revels in the references and is happy to poke fun at many of the elements of Star Trek that are funny, but never moves on from that. And the question I have is that all? And I don't have an answer to that question. It's a very, I don't know, because I find Lower Decks wonderfully entertaining. It makes me laugh. I get many of the references and many of the in-jokes, and it makes me think about Star Trek episodes that I want to go back and watch again because of these references. But at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's just a half hour of, you remember this from Star Trek, right? Is that enough?
And you see, I would actually disagree that it never goes beyond just comedy. I do think Lower Decks had its moments, or at least character arcs, where you did get some depth with characters and some serious moments. Definitely not as much as The Orville. And I think what distinguishes a good comedy from a great comedy are the moments when it can take itself a little more seriously and actually hit you with some sort of effective messaging of some kind. But I wouldn't say Lower Decks is completely devoid of it. Just less of it. Like, it's a faster paced show, there's more laughs, less of the heavy hitting stuff, but there was some good stuff in there between Mariner and Captain Freeman. There was good stuff with Tendi and her family. And again, for the most part, it's all played up for laughs, but there are moments where it does tone it down and take itself a little more seriously, which I've always really liked about Lower Decks. But I do think in general, it's just meant to be a lighthearted show. Like, it's meant to just be a comedy where, yeah, every once in a blue moon we'll take it a little more seriously and have something a little more deep, but that's ultimately just not really what they were going for, which I think is fine. It really just depends on what you're after, and if you're not in the mood for fun laughs, then yeah, that's not the best show to watch. But if you're in the mood to just kind of have a good time, then I think it works.
I mean, I freely accept also that not necessarily a problem, but a trait of any show that relies very heavily on comedy is obviously what's funny to one person is definitely not going to be funny to another person. So it's very subjective whether some of the jokes and stuff land. Like, I personally absolutely hate like over the top slapstick stuff. So whenever the show did that, it just always kind of bounced off me. But some of the more witty repartee between characters, that usually always got me, because I always thought that was quite funny, because I prefer witty repartee.
That in general is one of the reasons why comedy is probably the hardest thing to write. It's harder than dramas, it's harder than horror. Horror is very close to comedy, which a lot of people don't realize. Really, the only difference between a comedy and a horror movie is the tone that you take with it. Like how serious are you taking yourself? That's really the only difference between a horror and a comedy show. And comedy, by most writing standards, is really, really tough, because you have to find both jokes that make at least a majority of your audience laugh, which is incredibly difficult because everyone is very different. Everyone has a very different style of comedy. So does that mean you have a mixture of jokes? Do you have slapstick and witty jokes? Or do you just go all in on one and like divide your audience? Like, making those decisions is very, very difficult. And I feel like Lower Decks definitely took the approach of, let's do a mixture of comedy here. Like, let's have...
It definitely works in its favor.
Yeah, because I go back and forth. Like, some slapstick gets me, some of it doesn't. Some witty jokes get me, some of them don't. So I appreciate that they had kind of a wide range to select from, so every episode at least had a few moments that really got me. But that also means pretty much every episode had other moments that did not land with me at all. So it's just tough. Like, again, comedy is really tough. Even some of my favorite shows that are comedies, I don't like every joke in them. Someone who's able to laugh at every single joke in a single movie or a single show, I envy you. Like, I'm glad you find everything funny, because I do not, and I think it is most people do not. So it's tough.
Do you think this show works as a show for newcomers to the franchise, or do you think it's better to watch the show with all the knowledge of Star Trek before? Because to me, I think this is a show that very much is preset on you having watched a lot of Star Trek before to get a lot of the jokes, the references, the humorous sort of little Easter eggs. But you said that your housemate had started watching it and was really enjoying it, and he had never watched Star Trek at all before. So I'm curious whether you think it's better to come in with plenty of Star Trek knowledge or no knowledge.
I think it's better to come in as a longtime fan, because I do think there's a solid amount of jokes and references that you're just not going to understand if you don't understand Star Trek. But I think they did find a decent middle ground where people like my roommate could just jump in and enjoy it as a fun Star Trek show. It wasn't like he was coming to me over and over again like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? He just some of the jokes didn't land for him, and he moved right along without any issue because he had never watched other Star Trek other than Strange New Worlds. That's the only other show he has seen.
Has he gone back to watch the legacy shows as a result, or?
He's starting on Voyager thanks to, not thanks to Lower Decks, but thanks to Strange New Worlds. He has gone back to watch Voyager. But yeah, he just enjoyed Strange New Worlds so much that he was like, oh, maybe my opinion of Star Trek wasn't correct. I should go give it a look-see. To be fair, though, it's not like he watched it of his own accord. I forced him to watch Strange New Worlds. I said, this is a great show. I think you would like it. He's like, I don't know. I don't like Star Trek. I'm like, have you watched it? And obviously he hadn't. So I was like, all right, well, you're going to sit down and you're going to watch this. And you don't have a choice. Give me your phone. And then
Just like what I did to you.
I mean, you didn't force me. You just said,
I'm putting
I love
something
Star
on.
Trek, and I'm putting this on. And I said, all right, I've never watched it. Let's go.
That's how the hive mind works, you know.
I'm a very open person when it comes to media. I will, as I said earlier in the video, I think everything deserves a chance.
Don't let the Boar Queen hear you say that. Yeah,
well, fuck her. If you've never seen it, I don't think you can honestly judge something.
No. I would fully agree, and I am glad that having gotten you into Star Trek, it's made me watch the rest of Discovery and watch Lower Decks, because I feel I'm a lot more informed now.
Now that all we have left is Prodigy, which we do have to watch.
Favorite character from Lower Decks?
I'll give two answers. I think favorite character just based off of how much I enjoy seeing him and the funny shit he'll say or do is probably Shax.
Yeah, he's quite good.
But in terms of really well written character, I really enjoy this character. It's probably Mariner is my favorite.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think Shax is tremendously funny, and seeing him try to have a terrorist off with Kira in the DS9 episode was genuinely funny.
That was really good.
If I was to go with something in regards to writing, I do like Captain Freeman. She just, I love, because of her, the ship's role, and I want to talk about the ship in a sec, but because of the ship's role and their job, she understandably is quite a bit sort of, for God's sake, why does it have to be us? She's always kind of a little bit grumpy, but she does her best to, appear happy for her crew, and also having to deal with her daughter being on board, and her daughter being no Wesley Crusher, shall we say, no well-behaved daughter. I can imagine she pulling her hair out in her ready room quite a lot. I just really enjoy her a very different sort of captain persona to any of the other captains that we have seen.
I really enjoyed her as a captain. At first, I would say within the first season, I was always a little down on her just because I think she was a little too grumpy for my liking, but never unprofessional, which again, as a captain, I was like, all right, she's decent. And then as time has gone on, she's really warmed up to a lot of her crew and has opened up more as a person, and we've learned more about her, and I think she's a good character. I do like her as a captain. I wouldn't put her at the bottom of my list.
No, I don't think I would put any of the Lower Decks crew at the bottom of the list, apart from perhaps Ransom.
Yeah, Ransom goes at the bottom for me. I can't stand Ransom. I know some people think he's really funny, but he just drives me insane.
Is it bad that I think in the back of my head, now that he's captain, I'm like, you are all gonna fucking die?
I mean, I certainly don't have a lot of faith in him as a captain.
So obviously Lower Decks gave us a brand new hero ship in the form of the Cerritos, the California class. What do we think?
Oh, I love the Cerritos. I think design-wise, I love it. I enjoy, again, having a different take on a Star Trek series by this being a second contact ship. It's almost a cleanup crew kind of ship. And as a result, it's very adaptive to multiple situations, which I would say all of the hero ships in Star Trek are very adaptive to multiple situations. But
perhaps apart from the Defiant.
Yeah, I mean, that one's very, very specific, made for a very specific thing and can't really go outside of the realm of that. I really like the Cerritos. Again, I think the only, I guess, design critique I could have for it would be having the engineering section only be accessible through the nacelles.
How do they get that?
I mean, there was an episode where they kind of talked about it, where I think it was the one where they're fighting to get... Oh, okay, trying to remember how the episode went. They were fighting with Beta Crew or something. It was either like the night crew that they were trying to get somewhere in engineering. They had to go through the nacelles to do it, and they gave you a layout as to how you get there and everything. I can't remember if they were trying to get a specific bunk or something. It was a fun, quirky little episode where they were just having a little rivalry with a different crew on the ship. But they did at one point kind of explain it, and upon explaining it, I'm like, I can see a few issues with that. But ultimately, I do really like the design.
Yeah, I have definitely come around to it. I wasn't initially a big fan of it, but there are many elements I like. I like the subtle references to the Sovereign class with the stepped back on the saucer and the sort of Miranda-inspired underslung nacelles. Proper nacelles as well, correct length, correctly proportioned for the size of the ship. They actually look like nacelles. Discovery. One of the features of the Cerritos I really like is the raised little torpedo blisters on the top of the saucer section. I don't know what, maybe it's my love of World War II style battleships and stuff, but there's something about the raised torpedo blisters that I'm like, that's cool.
I wonder how much of that is just because it's such a simplistic look, being the art style of the show, and how much of it is intentionally like that.
I mean, that is one thing we haven't actually spoken about is just how the show actually looks, because I haven't watched many of these animated shows, but I thought Lower Decks has had some really amazing visual for an animated program.
I would agree. I mean, I've seen a lot more animated shows than you have, and I feel like it doesn't rank super high for me. There's certain animes and even Western cartoons that I think have had more impressive visuals, on a consistent basis.
Just from one that we've both seen, Last Airbender was pretty damn cool. So,
yeah, I mean, even then, it could be better. Just in terms of Star Trek, I feel like they did have some pretty solid visuals, and I can appreciate them having such a simplistic design to the aesthetic just to make animation easier and smoother. But they also never really did too much with that ease of animation. It's not like they made really, really long episodes or long finales or anything as a result of the animation being more simplistic, so I feel like they could have done a little bit more with it.
Any sort of standout moment or episode from the show? The Voyager episode was, I thought, pretty interesting because, it at least shows what happens to Voyager after she got back, and there's a lot of nice Voyager references there, and the Intrepid did look good in the animation style. I mean, that's one thing I would say about the show overall. A lot of the other Star Trek ships looked really good. The Titan, proper Titan, the Sovereign class, the Steamrunner class, they all looked really pretty cool in the animation style, I would say.
A standout moment from the show, honestly, it might be the cave episode. I really liked that one. Not only was it funny to kind of poke fun at how many Star Trek episodes take place in a cave where the minerals are blocking something. They had just fun little short stories in it, and then a nice little deep cut from the animated series with the weird aliens that were putting them on trial, essentially. I really enjoyed that episode. If not that episode, I'm sorry, I can't think of the names off the top of my head. But the one where the Cerritos crew is all tested on the
and
on the
Boimler
holodeck
becomes OCD about getting 100%.
Yeah, and he literally gets assimilated as a result of that because he has to get like the perfect score. They can't let him out too early. I thought that was both a really funny episode, but also one that showcased that the crew of the Cerritos can handle their business. So I really enjoyed that one, and also another deep cut from the animated series.
Yeah, I think all pretty good choices. Obviously, you know, the Voyager episode for me, the DS9 episode.
The DS9 one was very good. I didn't like the Voyager one that much, actually. As much as I love Voyager and all the references to it, I thought the episode itself was not fantastic.
I mean, there are obviously some sort of memes that are going to be remembered for a while from this particular episode. Moopsy, obviously, is going to be very famous. You can get Moopsy plushies now. I almost brought you one for Christmas.
I should definitely get one. Like, I might buy myself one.
The bit where they first see Nick Lacano on screen and Boimler and Mariner have that little conversation. It's Tom Paris, right?
Nice little jab at the continuity.
So the episode where Rom and Lita come aboard to discuss the treaty with the Federation, and basically Rom and Lita basically test the Cerritos crew to see if they get Ferengi sort of business acumen and stuff. I thought that was a really good episode, and it was really good to see Rom come back as Grand Nagus and doing a pretty damn good job.
Again, I enjoyed the show. It's not my favorite Star Trek show, but it's certainly not one that I dislike either. It's probably middle tier for me. Like, it was very enjoyable. I'm a little sad that the show has ended, and I feel like ended on a somewhat mediocre note as well, but overall enjoyed the show. Hope we can see the characters pop in and out every once in a while in some fashion. Like another crossover Strange New Worlds episode would not upset me, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall the show definitely didn't deserve to be cancelled on such a sort of surprise basis, and it did end on a bit of a squib, but the show definitely is a good Star Trek show. I don't think it's for everybody. I think
definitely not. I mean, the same way Rick and Morty is not for everybody. I think this show is not for everyone.
But I definitely think that perhaps the way I responded to it when it first came out was definitely a bit unfair, and I think even if you don't get the humor, I think all the references will make you feel nostalgic for those episodes and make you want to go back and rewatch so many good Star Trek episodes. So just for that alone, I think the show is a worthwhile little sort of historical jaunt through Star Trek over the last many decades. So yeah, sad to see it stop. But let us know down in the comments what you think of Lower Decks now that the whole show is over and done with. Obviously, we'll be trying our best to continue with all the videos in the new year and trying to be a bit more regular with them, and trying to not have them all as episode reviews this year. Last year was just, here's all of Discovery, here's all of Lower Decks. So yeah, we'll have to, now that we've got some time to do some non-review episodes, we'll tackle some non-review topics.
Yep, we'll have to hurry though, because Strange New Worlds is coming up.
Yes, it is. But yeah, let us know in the comments what you thought about the rest of Lower Decks, and don't also forget to subscribe to the channel if you are new, to make this year a happy growth one. But until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.